I think that Peter Zeihan may have had one of the worst takes on Bitcoin in history, and I think this is going to embarrass him for a very long time. People are probably going to share this video for decades to come, and we want to make sure that you get to watch this video from us before you get it from some random person. So go ahead and share that video, Jor.
So this is on Joe Rogan, correct?
Yeah.
There's no intrinsic value to this asset. And now it's starting to be priced appropriately. So it has a, what's Bitcoin at? 16,000? It has another 17,000 to go down.
Duh, really?
Yeah, there's no intrinsic value to this product.
And do you think that people have just inherently lost faith in the idea behind crypto because of FTX?
Well, it became an ideology. And whenever you invest based on an ideology, you're going to make some decisions that are a little divorced from math.
And what do you mean by ideology?
Well, the people who really like crypto are convinced that it's the currency of the future and that a decentralized ledger is the way to go, and that anything that is controlled by a government entity is by definition a negative. And if it's done by the private sector freely, it will be better. And that's just not how currency works. Currency is a method of exchange and a store of value. And for that, there has to be a degree of trust, and you have to have it managed in terms of volume. I mean, one of the craziest things about Bitcoin is that there will never be more than X number of units of Bitcoin. Well, by default, that means it can't be used for trade, because the whole idea of economic activity is that there's expansion, which means you need more currency to lubricate and manage that expansion. If currency is locked in at a specific number, you get monetary inflation, and that is one of the fastest ways to destroy an economic model.
Hey, Jor, can you pause it for a second?
Lack of Bitcoin, because there's a certain.
The crazy thing is that he sounds so smart.
Yeah.
He sounds so smart. He sounds so well informed, like he knows what he's talking about. He's just repeating everything that he probably learned in school.
Well, on that note, did you guys go through any finance courses in school, like economics?
I did.
Yeah, you would have. Forrest, you didn't, right?
No.
Yeah, I remember going through, I minored in economics, and other than the supply and demand aspect of the economics courses that I took, it was all based on the money printer, the inflation, how it's different between different parts of the world. It was never why, where's this value actually being derived from? That was the whole missing link for me.
Yeah, it's just expected. They just expect. We can go back to the video. Sorry, I just had to say that because that word jumble that he had right there, it was just so many big words, and he probably doesn't even understand them.
I think go ahead, Forrest.
Yeah, when you say stuff with confidence, people will believe you. And this guy, he has an air of smugness around him. Even it's so confident that it's become smug. And he's a geopolitical commentator, so he's not really savvy about economics or anything anyway. And he might be right about some of the geopolitical stuff that he researches and talks about, but he's kind of talking out of his lane as well. But anyway.
It reminds me of that. There was a banker in the US who did an interview. I think it was last year, central banker. And it was the same kind of thing. It's they just use bigger words so that the average person doesn't really understand what they're saying, but they're like, oh, well, this guy's in a suit. He's using big words. He must know what he's talking about. And that other guy, maybe we'll watch that clip, either this one or a next one, but it was the same kind of thing. Just a bunch of word salad, big words, didn't actually make any sense. But for the average person, they just buy it.
Certain controlled number, the only thing that can happen is Bitcoin becomes more expensive.
Right. And that means that the people who hold it are the ones that make the money, but everyone else suffers. I'm sorry, that's not viable. The alternative is you have some private dude out there who generates the coins on a whim. How is that different from the monetary reserve or the monetary authorities that we have at the Federal Reserve, except for the point that there's no accountability? No.
So conflating Bitcoin and crypto, right? They started talking about Bitcoin, but now he's talking about how some guy can create more of these monetary units, and how is that different than the fiat system? And again, he's right about that. Then this is the same thing with that Gary economics guy who's become popular, is they just bunch these two things together when they're so fundamentally different, which is Bitcoin and crypto, right? Like my channel, my own channel, Bitcoin, not crypto. It's not because Bitcoin's not a cryptocurrency. It's because people conflate these two things and they deserve to be separated, because Bitcoin is fundamentally different as the true innovation in the space and the one with the greatest potential to actually be a new monetary network. And the other one will collapse. Like he talks about like one thing in there, right, that he's correct about. He's like, oh, a deflationary type money will destroy the monetary system. And it's like, yeah, that's true. If we just overnight, if the system that we had, if dollars became deflationary, right, if they stopped being inflationary, if they stopped being debased, the system would collapse pretty quickly, because the entire system has been built on an inflationary currency. And if you were to do the exact opposite, it's not going to work anymore. It's going to implode. It's going to collapse. The debt's going to become untenable and an actual problem, right? It's a massive, huge number, but it's not a problem for the US because they can just print it away. That's how they can handle their debt load. So yeah, I mean, it's just, again, you know, he says these tiny little pieces of truth in there, but then he mixes all this stuff together, all these things that he doesn't know, conflates all these things. And then because there's little pieces of truth, you think, if you're not educated in all this stuff, you think the other things he's saying that are wrong, you think that they're right because something in there has been true.
Something that he said was, it was at 16K and he said it's going to 17K, or it's going down 17K. The funny thing is that if you don't understand what Bitcoin is, then you might actually believe him, because the cost of other commodities could actually be negative. Because let's say, for example, oil. If you don't have a use for oil and you just need a space to store it, you may actually have to pay somebody to take it from you, right? If there's a terrible enough situation where you can't hold oil, you have to pay somebody to take it. And at a point, I don't know if you guys remember, in 2020,
We've seen it, right?
Yeah,
right. There
happened.
was negative oil prices. So
Mhm.
he was saying that Bitcoin is going to negative 17K.
You know, negative 1K. It was going down.
Oh, yeah, sorry, negative 1K. It's going down 17K.
You know, I think what his reasoning for that was, just a little butt in there,
Yeah.
is because of the energy usage. It was like an energy usage complaint, and that basically the government was going to like regulate you and tax you because you contributed to Bitcoin. That was like his reasoning for it.
But
so
even
that
then,
you actually owe money because of the damage you've done to the environment, or from the Bitcoin mining. Like, it's ridiculous.
See, that makes a little bit more sense. I thought he was trying to compare it to like other commodities, because Bitcoin doesn't have a maintenance
Storage
fee,
cost.
A cost,
right?
yeah.
There's no cost to maintain it. There's no cost to store it. So all you have to do is you have to put it in this wallet. You pay for it once, and then there's no other cost.
Yeah.
And I'm almost I guarantee that regardless of what the cost to restore the environment is, somebody will buy your Bitcoin for a lot more than negative $1,000. You're not going to have to give somebody $1,000 to take your Bitcoin from you.
Yeah.
I remember when Bitcoin went to $15,000. Like, it wasn't that long ago. It was like November 2023, I believe it was around 15.
2022.
Dude, this video was recorded in January 2023.
Oh, it's okay. So it was November 2022 then.
Yeah.
I think it was recorded before that, and they just posted it later.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I do remember, like, I remember when it went up in 2021 and then it started going down. And the lower it got, the more people like Peter started coming on the woodwork saying that, you know, every time it goes down, I had people text me, like the financial advisor of the world. Everybody takes their shot at you when Bitcoin's down, but nobody texts you when Bitcoin's all of a sudden $108,000. Like, it's crazy. Everybody, it just seems like people who are so entrenched in that old world, people who have benefited so much from that financial system, they want this thing to disappear. They're just hoping that it fails or it just quietly goes away into the distance. But, you know, as we talked about in a recent video, it's not going anywhere. And I think the sooner they can realize that, the better for themselves, their family, and their careers it's going to be. But for some reason, there's so many people out there who still think that this is going to fail, including Peter.
Yeah.
And I mean, 2023, that's 2 years ago, and it was at 16K. He thought it was going to go lower than that. I mean, what a bargain, right? For something that people are paying 107,000 for today, right? It's the same thing, but people are paying so much more for it.
So do you guys think that Peter Zeihan is actually just a retail investor? Like, you know how retail investors, they sell at the bottom, they sell it when the fear is the worst. Do you think that he would be considered a retail investor? Because if he had Bitcoin, I bet you he would be selling there.
Yeah,
'Cause-
I mean, yeah, likely. I mean, we're
Yeah.
speculating on that. Likely, he might have ulterior motives. Like, I don't know
Oh,
who
maybe, yeah.
funds this guy. I don't know. Like, maybe he has talking points so that other certain types of demographics of his audience will respect him and enjoy his content based on his political beliefs. Right? Again, he's a geopolitical commentator, so he comes at that from some bias. You get some audience, right? It's politically popular at that point to attack Bitcoin if you're on a certain side. So potentially that's why too. Like, I don't
Yeah.
think he has any like financial interest or in any of this stuff, obviously. But yeah,
So-
clearly, because he thinks he's going to zero, right?
yeah.
Going down that road, then, if he focuses on geopolitical stuff, and Bitcoin is apolitical, is it not?
Yeah. No,
I,
That to me would be kind
at
of
its, at
I
its
think it's just
core, it is.
neutral.
Yeah, at its core, it's
Political, but it is
apolitical.
neutral.
that's what I mean. So like if these different countries didn't have their own currencies and their different markets and different things going on, Peter probably wouldn't have a job.
Yeah.
And I really think that in the next couple of decades, we're going to see a huge shift of political power. It might go from countries. I think some countries are going to fail. I think some countries are going to be absorbed by other countries. And the whole thing, in my opinion, is going to come back to who has how much Bitcoin. The countries that have the most Bitcoin on their balance sheet and are actually making use of their energy in their countries are going to succeed. And it might be some countries, it might be some corporations like MicroStrategy. I think will have more influence than any country on the planet, which is really hard to believe, I think, at this point in the game. But play this thing out a couple decades and beyond that, I really think that that's a shift that we're going through right now. And Peter, I don't know if he subscribes to that theory or not, but I could see how there would be some sort of conflict of interest in that sense, where if you're taking all these different political powers and essentially taking your job away, of course you would want this thing to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah, Peter's not going to make it.
At the end there, he said something like he doesn't like it that the people who hold Bitcoin, and he actually said in the video, Bitcoin is going to go up forever, basically.
Yeah, it's so funny. He said that it's going to go to negative 1,000, but that it's designed and built to just enrich the people that hold it. So he's talking about how it's going to go up. It's like,
So he just seems like he probably just feels like he missed out.
maybe.
I think there's a lot of
Why
people
can't-
like that.
Yeah. And like they just there are so many people. Like there was this guy who I posted a picture of a conversation with him. He was like, I hope that crypto people lose everything. It's so stupid. It's going to 11K. I'm going to buy at that price. But it's just like people are just angry because they feel like they missed out, but they didn't. That's the thing. We're still early. He could have bought at 17K, 16K.
5x
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
today.
Yeah.
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 I want to talk about two things from this conversation. One of them is the deflationary aspect of it and why people think that that's a problem and why it's really not. And the other thing I want to talk about is Bitcoiners being rich and everybody else suffering. And I don't know if you guys have any more points from this you want to talk about, but the deflationary aspect of this, what's kind of like your first thoughts on that aspect? The fact that the system we have is designed to create money so we can keep expanding. Essentially, that's his theory on this, which is completely backwards. I think if you subscribe to Austrian economics, but like maybe talk through that. Why would he think that that's a problem and why is it not a problem?
Maybe he's invested in banks. Maybe he has some kind of financial incentive because he's probably benefited from the Cantillon effect. I would be surprised if he doesn't own real estate and stocks.
Right.
I'm sure he does. Yeah. I think it's just a fundamental, like there's two different schools of economics, right? There's the Austrian economics and there's the Keynesian economics. And, people that a lot of the economics that people are taught is Keynesian economics, which is just promotes basically an inflationary money supply so that there isn't problems with liquidity. And there's also the incentive to continue to spend, and they believe that spending is what drives growth, when it's actually quite the opposite. It's savings and investing that actually drives growth. So I think with that, right, is The idea of like, if you have an inflationary currency, you're incentivized to spend it, which means you're not going to hoard it. There's this idea of like, if your money goes up in value, if we were on gold standard, everybody's just going to hoard their money and keep it from everybody, and nobody else is going to share in the wealth. But if you take money out of circulation, it actually makes the money that other people have more valuable. So then they can actually purchase things easier, and they have to spend less of what money they have. So it has actually, again, the opposite effect. I think the other thing there is with the thing I mentioned about liquidity, right? So if there's not new money being added to the market, and people are saving, then there's not enough money to spend, not enough money to go around. But the real solution to that is divisibility. So Bitcoin can be devised down. It's actually, Bitcoin are the units of Satoshis. So there's 100 million Satoshis to a single Bitcoin. And those are actually what makes up a UTXO, which makes up what Bitcoin is as far as like a monetary unit. And we can devise that further down with a simple soft fork. It's programmable money, and I don't think that would be a contentious soft fork. It would reach consensus really easily if it's needed, because the divisibility makes it so that you can transport and move these around easier, and that these units are worth less because they're smaller units, and you can buy smaller amounts of goods and services with them. So with a deflationary money that's raising in value over time, if you make it more divisible, you can still spread that money out as needed.
And then over time, as people have less money, so let's say, for example, a house's cost. So just a real life example of what Forrest said there. Let's say a house costs 4 Bitcoin today. A lot of people don't have 4 Bitcoin today, and in the future, fewer and fewer people will have 4 Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
Because the people who have it, they'll be spending theirs, they'll be giving it away. So fewer and fewer people will have 4 Bitcoin. And because it's this basic supply and demand, if somebody's willing to sell their house for 4 Bitcoin, but if there's no buyer, the price has to come down. So the price is forced down. So eventually it goes to 3 Bitcoin. People who don't have, there's nobody who has 3 Bitcoin who wants to buy a house, drops to 2 Bitcoin. Nobody who has 2 Bitcoin who wants to buy a house, again, drops to 1. Then it drops to 0.5. Then it drops to 0.1. Eventually, like 0.1 Bitcoin may not sound like it makes any sense. Oh, 0.1 Bitcoin is so little, I can buy a house for it. That doesn't make any sense. But then you have to look at the number of Satoshis, because Bitcoin is going to become so valuable at that point that you're going to be looking at things in terms of Satoshis and not in terms of Bitcoin. If you're looking at things in terms of Bitcoin, you're going to be thinking 0.00001 Bitcoin for my month of groceries, or whatever the numbers are like. So at that point, you're going to be looking at not 0.1 Bitcoin for a house, you're going to be looking at 10 million Satoshis for a house. And at some point, 10 million Satoshis for a house is going to sound expensive, because it's mathematically impossible for everybody on Earth to have 10 million Satoshis. So over time, the price of everything keeps decreasing and decreasing. And on the other side of this, so for
In
whatever
Bitcoin
reason,
terms.
exactly. So for whatever reason, people think that if prices go down, then entrepreneurs won't have an incentive to produce value. But it's the complete opposite. If anything, they want to produce value today so that they can capture that value and put it into Bitcoin so they can have the best asset in the world. And then in the future, as prices decrease, they can use that Bitcoin to sustain their lifestyle. So they have an incentive to produce as much value as they can today. And I think, if anything, this actually improves the world. We probably won't see as much planned obsolescence, right? Because over time, we know that the price of something is going to keep decreasing, and you're going to be able to get less Bitcoin for it. And building relationships is going to be so key. Building a brand is going to be so key. Building trust is going to be so important. So the companies, let's say, for example, the 3 of us, we've come together and we've built this thing. And in our entire time making this content, in my entire time making content, I've never screwed somebody over. We've never screwed somebody over. So over time, because we're thinking in terms of, let's say, a few years from now, we're doing whatever we can to create as much value as we can to turn this into a business with a service that probably was never provided before. Nobody's talking to people the way that we are. And now we're capturing Bitcoin because of the value that we're creating. And we're living in a deflationary environment. But we know that it took us let's say a year, 2 years, 3 years to get to where we are now. The next 3 to 5 years, we're going to make so much value that we're going to be able to retire. And that's the incentive to create more value. That's where entrepreneurs come in. I think we're going to see a lot more small businesses. We're going to see a lot fewer large corporations because of Bitcoin, because these entrepreneurs, the people who have these ideas, they're going to be able to carry them out because they're going to have savings. And then they're going to be able to directly compete with massive, massive organizations. And it's just it shares the wealth.
And it's an efficiency gainer.
Yes.
Like it's going to
So it's gonna
create
be less
so
waste.
much. It's going to cut so much waste. Like the 493 companies in the S&P 500, a lot of them are there because of their closeness to the money printer, and
Yes.
they're not really that efficient. They're not really that profitable. They're not really a very good business. They maybe were at one point as they were growing. Then they reached a size where they can get cheap access to capital and they can float by, and they're basically what is referred to as a zombie company. There's a ton of those out there. And why are we rewarding that? Like the fiat system rewards that type of behavior, but it's incredibly wasteful. It's incredibly inefficient. And it suffocates out the room for genuine entrepreneurs and businesses that are efficient, that are just at a smaller scale. And they can't break into that because there's these conglomerates and these giant corporations that just have taken over, and people use them, but they're not really that profitable of a business. So I think it's a huge productivity and efficiency unlock when we switch over to Bitcoin.
That's so well. Can I just make one point just based on what Forrest was saying there? I feel like right now with the current financial system, the barrier to entry for businesses is also so high, right? Because let's say for example, you're taking a payment on Stripe. They're going to take like 5% of your payment, right? And you probably have to have a minimum payment that you have to charge. So you can't use the current financial system in certain parts of the world.
Yeah, you
It
might
all
not even be
adds up.
allowed. You might not even be allowed to use Stripe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no permission with Bitcoin and the layer 2s as well, which cut down on fees, right? I'm building a business that completely operates on the Lightning Network, and I'm not asking for permission. I run my own little node that costs $300, and I can facilitate. I'm an unlicensed money transmitter. I can facilitate as much money transfer as I want without the bank's permission. I just have some sats on my node. It's like you don't have to ask permission to use this network. Nobody does.
Hopefully Carney didn't hear that.
I mean, they don't think that it's money, so it doesn't really matter, right? They don't think that Bitcoin is money.
True.
I'm an unlicensed commodity transmitter.
There you go. That's
or
right.
whatever
That's even
whatever
worse.
they label it as.
CFTC is going to come out. Is it CFTC is going to come after you.
I think one point I wanted to mention on that, because I think this is important for people to understand, in the sense of, like, in a deflationary world, which is where we're going to, on a Bitcoin standard anyways, it's going to keep going up in fiat terms, just like everything has, and everything will continue to. But if you're holding Bitcoin, everything's actually getting much cheaper for you. And there is going to come a point, Rajat mentioned 10 million sats for a house, and then it's going to be 1 million sat for a house. And then it might be 5 sats for a house. It really depends on how far you're looking out into the future here. Like if you're looking 100 years from now, you take what the miners are making right now for adding energy to the network and securing the network in fiat terms and the purchasing power, and you zoom out that far and see how scarce that's going to be. That could happen, and it probably will, just as long as you have a long enough time frame. But before that, you're going to be able to go into the grocery store and say, I got 5 sats, or I got 1 sat even. What am I supposed to buy? It'd be like going into a grocery store today with a gold coin, like an ounce of gold that's worth $3,000. And you're like, well, what am I supposed to do with this right now? I can't divide this, but that's what Forrest said there. It's divisible. We can go past Satoshis. We can go to micro Satoshis. And it might not even have to happen on layer 1, because people have to remember here, layer 1, the only thing that exists on Bitcoin network is Satoshis. Bitcoin's not even on there.
Mm-hmm.
So Satoshis, it might require a soft fork, but it also might be layers built on top of Bitcoin, like Lightning, Liquid, eCash, different products, ETFs, or currencies. Like the True North guys talk about strats instead of sats, which is like a currency backed by strategies, Bitcoin. Like all these things could happen. And then you're able to build on top of that and essentially create more without actually creating more. I think that that's the whole idea. You can create more units, but you're actually not increasing the size of the total pie there.
Right.
Very similar to like a pizza, the pizza analogy, where you got 8 slices, we'll call those sats right now. And if you cut those into 16 pieces, that could be microsats. That doesn't mean the pizza actually increases. We're just making the units smaller because what those units are actually worth, you need to accommodate for that in the future.
I bet Peter believes if you cut pizza into enough slices, you could feed the world with it.
Exactly. That's the whole Keynesian theory.
Yeah.
It's like you just keep increasing the size of the pizza and you can feed everybody, but that's not the case. And that's what we've seen. I think the saying something like a world with an abundance of money creates scarcity. And that's exactly where we are today. We have an abundance of money and it's very scarce to try to get things because there's so much competition with each other. And the flip side of that is a world with scarce money creates abundance. And it's absolutely true. And that's exactly what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes here is examples of that and why this is going to play out the way it is.
Something that I was just thinking about is I need to get a new car. I want to get it today. Maybe this is something that scares Peter Zeihan, right? I want to get it today, but I'm going to delay my purchase because I want the price to drop. And to all these people, that's deadly. I'm ruining the economy. But the way that I see it today, that car is going to cost me 0.2 Bitcoin. So if I buy a car for like 30K, 0.2 Bitcoin, I want to wait until the car's price is at 0.1 Bitcoin. So whatever the price is at that point, let's say it goes to 40K. Instead of 30K, it's at 40K. But now I can buy that car for 0.1 Bitcoin because Bitcoin's price has gone to 400K and now 400K US. So that'll be actually 400K Canadian. So maybe 270K US. I'd be able to buy that car even though the price has gone up. Now I can buy 2 cars for the same amount of Bitcoin.
So think about that then, because in that world where people actually have a money that they can actually store their time and energy effectively in, they're going to be less likely to just go out and waste and just spend their money like we do today. And so what does that create? If you think through that, what does that create? It creates more competition. The car companies are actually going to have to work harder, make better vehicles, have better customer service, have better sales teams there to make Rajat part with his sats for that car. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be more difficult for business owners to actually get people to buy things. So they're actually going to have to make quality products again. Otherwise, why would people spend that amount of sats? If you understand Bitcoin and you can just hold on a little bit, you don't actually need that today, then these companies are going to have to work harder to actually produce products and services that are of value for a change.
I think something else that factors into is the food, right? So
absolutely,
Bitcoiners are willing to spend more money to get the higher quality cuts of meat. They're willing to pay more for better oils. They're willing to pay more for better fats. So what that means is more businesses are going to be willing to create those products to get your Bitcoin from you.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to do it with integrity because they know that they don't want to mess up their reputation. If you start buying from, like, if I go to somebody and I trust them and I start buying things from, like, the mechanic that I go to, I've been going to him for like 5 years. I haven't even really thought about it until right now. I haven't even thought about going to another mechanic, right? Let's say you go to an accountant. You're going to keep going to the same accountant unless they ruin your trust, right? So all these companies are going to do what they do with integrity. They're going to provide you with the highest quality foods. I actually went to Costco and I saw that they had beef tallow there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised they've never had it before. So that company, if they do well, maybe their main customer is Bitcoiners, and Bitcoiners really want that beef tallow because it's high quality. I don't know if you guys have you guys noticed this? I don't really care about the $1 or $2 difference between one thing versus another. I think the reputation actually it's become more and more important to me as I became a Bitcoiner. So as I learned more about Bitcoin, the reputation has become more important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right, like Energizer versus some random company who creates batteries. I mean, I'm not saying that maybe it's the exact same product, but if the vast majority of people are saying that, okay, Energizer is better, I'm okay with paying a little bit more. And that just that it rewards the people who create value, and they do it because they really want to, not because they're trying to get as much value out of you as possible.
Well, it's gonna in that world that we're talking about here, that's gonna eliminate a lot of businesses that have just been around because they've been the
Yeah.
only option for people, whether it's through a local market, but now with the internet, everybody being connected pretty much worldwide. Like it's basically going to do what should have been done a very long time ago, which is it's going to cut out the companies that aren't actually adding value to the world. There's been
Yeah.
so many different companies and non-government entities and all these things that have basically been subsidized by the government to do what they do instead of by the free market. Bitcoin is the perfect tool for a free market and a connected world now. And so in that world, you're actually going to see a lot of businesses fail because they aren't up to speed with quality, integrity. They've been the only option, but now there's more options. And the people who actually have the wealth, Bitcoiners today, but everybody in the future is going to be on this standard. They're going to want quality. And if you can't meet that, then you're going to fail. And that's how it should be.
Yeah.
It is how it should be. And you know, this all kind of goes to the point that Peter had of where if there's a deflationary currency, the holders are just going to hold on to it and not use it. What we're saying here is we are willing to use it. We're just looking for better stuff. We're maybe looking to delay our gratification or delay the purchase so that we have to spend less of it, because we know it's going to, in the case of Rajat there, we know Bitcoin's going to outperform the rising cost of a vehicle, right? The cost of the vehicle isn't going to go up faster than the value of Bitcoin. So you're just doing that trade-off. And you're not saying, oh, I'm never going to buy another car. I'm going to just walk. I'm going to bike. I'm going to just, you know, use an old jalopy. You're saying, I am going to get a car, but I'm just going to wait a little bit. And eventually I will have to get a car. And that's the thing about this whole inflationary type fiat currency system we live in, is it's like they're trying to make us spend when we don't really want to. It's just we have no better choice. And we should have the choice to not spend if we don't want to, and still retain our purchasing power, or potentially even increase it. And eventually, like we all, you know, you can only delay your purchases for so long. You need to eat, you need to get a vehicle, you need to pay rent or get a house, and eventually you're going to die. So you start to value all those. You start to look at time. You start to think, what is worth spending my Bitcoin on? How much do I want to pass on? All of that. You just start being smarter with your finances, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what's so crazy, is that he's saying that there's something wrong with individuals having control and power over their own finances.
Yes.
That's essentially what he's saying.
Do you think he was trying to say that the problem isn't with people holding the money, but, or actually the problem is with people not putting that money into businesses, so they're not growing businesses? I think that's what he was trying to say. But again, that goes into people making their own businesses because they have savings.
Yeah, exactly. And those businesses and those investments, they just have to outperform Bitcoin, which is entirely possible. And as businesses, you know, right now we're kind of in this phase of like leverage Bitcoin equities with maybe not even an underlying business, but eventually every single corporation in the world will just be on a Bitcoin standard. Bitcoin will be the currency, and they'll be acquiring more Bitcoin, and they'll be, you know, balancing their balance sheet and having Bitcoin on there, and, you know, accepting Bitcoin and all this. And then it's just, you're valuating them just as we do today with fiat. You're just saying, how much is their future cash flows of Bitcoin? I'm going to put a forward PE on this company because I believe they can acquire more Bitcoin over time because they're a good business and people like them.
They're adding value.
They're adding value. Yeah. And they're acquiring Bitcoin, and they're, you know, they're growing. So that's all that's going to happen there. It's not that drastic of a change. It's the same thing. It's just with a better currency.
Yeah.
Yes. The other part I wanted to talk about here, boys, was what was it? Bitcoiners are going to be rich and everybody else is going to be poor. And I really think that people believe that to be true. And because I actually had a conversation with a lady and her son earlier this week, and she was a Bitcoiner. The mom was a Bitcoiner, but we were having a conversation with the kid about Bitcoin. And he was a pretty smart kid. He knew what was going on in the world. He was pretty well educated, I think, and not in the education system, but just like overall. He's pretty in tune with things. And he said, yeah, this sounds great, except the people who have Bitcoin are going to be rich. They're going to have all the wealth, and everybody else is going to have nothing. And I really believe that a lot of people think that. And basically what I said to him, and I'm interested to hear what you guys say on this too, but like basically what I said to him is that that's not true at all. Bitcoin, when we move into this world with a currency that's backed by energy, everybody's going to benefit from that. And if you think back to the days of gold backing currency, you can look at the date in 1971 where we went off the gold standard officially. It happened a little bit before that in the 30s, I think, officially. But in 1971, everything started getting worse because we gave people, a small group of people, the ability to create money. And when you give people the ability to create money, every time they print new money, we get poorer. The people without assets, the average person, get poorer in that situation. But if you take that away from them and you say, hey, you can't create money anymore, we're going to use a currency that's actually backed by something, energy, like gold is basically energy, Bitcoin is energy. That changes the dynamic for everything, because these governments, these centralized entities can no longer make people poor and steal their time. It's a whole different thing now. And so I think that every single person on the planet, regardless if you have 50 sats or 50 Bitcoin, everybody is going to benefit from a system that's backed by energy, a currency backed by energy. Everybody benefits in that system.
Yeah, for me, there's no way of creating a system where everybody has the same amount of wealth. And that isn't what Bitcoin is trying to do either. There's going to be a wealth, a
gap.
a degree. There's going to be a degree of how wealthy you are and how much power you have because of how much Bitcoin you hold. And that isn't going to be evenly distributed. There's no way of that. But every single person on a Bitcoin standard, if say fiat disappears and we all just switch over to Bitcoin, and there's a bunch of people that just need to start getting some Bitcoin, and however they get it, all of those people benefit more. Like we're all going to have, on average, a better life on Bitcoin than on fiat. So because there's less unfair aspects to it. There isn't being closer to the money printer. There's more talented people, more valuable people in the world that will acquire more Bitcoin than people that are not working as hard or not providing as much value or whatever.
Yes.
But even those people that are doing the bare minimum, if they're getting paid in Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is still working for them, that they have.
That's the key. Yeah. It's most people see Bitcoin as like an investment, that it's like a stock where it's going to go up and they can sell it. It's actually a savings technology. And if you're saving whatever value that you're adding to the world, if you're storing that in Bitcoin, you're not going to get devalued. Your time's not going to be stolen from you anymore. You're actually going to have a way to protect that purchasing power. And that's the key there, I think.
Yeah.
Because somebody in Argentina right now, they might work 15 hours a day. But if they're storing their wealth in the Argentinian dollar, the peso, whatever it is there, their life is getting harder and harder. But if they flip that into Bitcoin, whatever they've been making and earning every day, they store that in Bitcoin. Nobody can take that away from them anymore. Nobody can steal that value from them anymore, because nobody can create Bitcoin.
Exactly.
So that adds power to them, even though they don't have a bunch of Bitcoin maybe, but whatever they're storing their time and energy in Bitcoin is going to go much further than the fiat currencies that can be printed.
100%. Yeah.
Was there anything else you guys want to talk about before we put a rest in peace, Peter, you dummy?
I think I'm good.
Good.
Buy Bitcoin.
Buy Bitcoin. Ignore all the Peters in the world. If any Peters trying to give you financial advice, run away from them.
Yeah. Sorry to all the Peters out there,
Actually,
but we got a few Peter bears in Bitcoin.
Peter Dunworth is pretty good.
Oh yeah,
true.
Peter Dunworth's pretty good.
Yeah.
He actually may be more bearish than us.
More bearish or bullish?
More bullish. Bullish. Yeah. He's pretty bullish. Yeah.
If that's possible. Yes. So, okay. Well, this has been a longer one. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. We're going to start probably doing more of these. We're going to do a good mixture of like shorter clips, maybe 9, 10, 11 minutes, but then some longer ones where we just kind of start on a topic and just kind of freestyle. So great conversation today, boys. Once again, that QR code right beside Rajat's head there, that's our Maple Bitcoin treasury. We're going to continue adding to that. And as we get more and more into there, we're going to continue growing this and adding more and more value here from everybody who has been enjoying it. So big shout out. This channel, this community is growing pretty fast and good pace. And we just want to say we appreciate it a lot. So thanks for another great chat here, boys. Another masterclass in Bitcoin. And sorry to any Peters out there once again, but we'll catch you on the next one, boys.